blog post. It was a partner called Humio, and like we've done with App Dynamics, Datadog, and other ones, they now have sort of a first-class Service Fabric monitoring experience. And so if Humio is amongst some of your monitoring partners you've used in the past, we've now added them to the list. And so, I'd encourage you, we'll see if we can get to do a demo of their integration, probably maybe at the next community call or something like this, but please go and check that out. Outside of that, no, it's kind of free-for-all questions. And of course, last time we did go through some of the roadmap side of things. So, feel free to look at the previous call that we did on the 32nd one about the roadmap for what we're doing. Those things inside the roadmap have now been published underneath Azure Updates. So if you search for Azure Updates and you look for Service Fabric as a product, you'll see there's a couple of them still missing that we're starting this week, but they've all been published there, so you can see what our roadmap looks like.
Perfect. All right, we got a first question. Is the data from Nashirwan, is the Data Explorer for stateful services still under development, or is it being released?
So today we still have the extension-based one that our coworker Jesse did, and that's open sourced. That's still the most fully fleshed Data Explorer that we have. What's being developed right now is a viewer editor for backups, so it'll have some of the same effect. But the idea is that you take a backup, look at the data, make sure that it was all good, maybe manipulate it, peel off a couple transactions, and then be able to do a restore. There is no built-in live viewer for the data that we've been planning on really for some time, besides kind of thinking about how to evolve something like Jesse's. So if you're familiar with that open source project, I'll dump the link in the queue or in the message.
I've just dumped the link.
Already, excellent. That's kind of the current best option for viewing the live data because it's going directly against the data in the service like any other API. And then the kind of backup editor explorer is how we're going to do kind of the offline data editor. That will continue to evolve. We are still working on it, but it's not there yet. We're working on other changes to the store to enable it. So that is still being worked on, but it's not got a timeline associated with it right now.
Okay, Marcin wants to know, do you know anything about VMS's upgrade for Windows Server 2019 Data Center Core OS upgrades? Currently, upgrades are supported only for the non-core version.
I don't know. Yeah, I know that this is the current statement from Windows and Azure, but I don't know what's driving it necessarily, or if there's a plan or a timeline to fix it. It's something we can look into. It's a question we're starting to get, but we don't control that ourselves. So it is something we can look at, but I don't know off the top of my head, unless anybody else does it.
Do your internal customers use more patch orchestration application or the VMS OS upgrades?
They use the image-based patching from the VM level. So fewer people use the patch orchestration app internally, and anybody on Azure tends not to use the patch orchestration app. The times that we see people still use the patch orchestration app on Azure are when they really need something like the node-by-node upgrades or the scheduling capabilities that POA has that aren't included in the base image-based patching capabilities of Azure. Most of the use of POA we see is outside of Azure in places where it's harder to maintain your own OS images. But in Azure, we tend to recommend the image-based patching.
So image-based patching, like should I use OS Gallery or should I wait for this VMS upgrade for Windows Server 2019? Or they are using the full version of the Windows Server 2019 without not the core version?
Most people we see in Azure are using the full version.
This is surprising because I'm noticing that the full version of Windows Server 2019, especially on smaller nodes, are much less stable. The cluster provisioning is successful like 1 per 3 attempts or something like that, and I can get much better success rate and much faster provisioning in the core version.
Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. And maybe send us a few of those cases where it's failed and we can look at them, or if you have tickets for them cut already. There might be something we can chase down there.
Yeah, we'll have to reach out to the VM scale set team again. I mean, we do frequently, so, but we don't know the answer to this one.
Okay, so I will try to create tickets. I thought that you're aware of those issues.
No, we see many issues, but it's hard. Yeah, we're not. But send us, if you have ticket numbers, send us them, and we will then sit down with the VM scale set team, which we know and we interact with daily virtually, and talk to them about it.
Okay. We have one in from Peter. Is there anything in the Azure hosted Service Fabric roadmap to allow automatic fabric upgrades with custom scheduling?
So this is upgrading the Service Fabric runtime in your clusters on a schedule. I know it's something that we talked about kind of in the context of POA and other things, but I don't know that we have that as a booked work item. I mean, I know we have it as a booked work item. I just don't know when it would show up.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's like it's either on or it's off.
Right.
And then you have to manually yourself or build a thing that does it.
Yeah, so I have seen people build a thing that goes to the Azure resource that is your cluster, switches it to automatic upgrade or picks a particular version, posts that, and then waits for the upgrade to complete and then switches it back to manual. That's a pretty common piece of automation that we've seen. I've actually seen people use Azure Automation or Azure Runbooks to do that.
I was about to say.
But we know we want to build that feature. We just haven't done it yet. So
yeah, Azure Runbooks, no, Azure Automation.
Yeah, whatever they're calling it now.
Which is slowly being integrated into. I think they just released a preview of that inside functions now, so it's all integrated. Anyway, that's one place you can do it because they have automation schedulers and things.
Yep.
Excellent, thank you.
Azure cron or whatever we're calling that, like that thing is.
No, it's called Azure Automation. So basically, you can do it's PowerShell as a service,
right?
To run scheduled jobs to change your ARM to update it all.
Yes.
And so they really kind of have that's the feature sort of integration.
So for example, this is one thing you can do with it, but you could also, if I wanted to have a simple thing that ran at 9 a.m. and set my VM scale set instance count to 10.
Yes.
And then ran at 5 p.m. and set my instance count to 5.
Yes.
This would be another way to do that.
Yeah.
It's a nice simple automation tool.
I think part of the problem was because there's so many things that you could automate across Service Fabric in different areas, and they're all exposed through ARM. That's kind of the way that we sort of pointed people to.
Yeah.
But admittedly, we haven't tried every version,
All right. Yeah, this is interesting.
Very interesting question.
Okay, so I'll just read it verbatim. But basically, I just say, do you envision there being Microsoft provided path to migration from classic Service Fabric apps to Service Fabric Mesh apps?
So this would be taking an app from your running Service Fabric cluster today and turning it into an app that's running in Mesh.
Yes. So yes, but we're thinking about this a lot. By the way, we refer to it as Service Fabric native as the actual term that we use, although a lot of people have been using classic, but we think classic sounds like it's not used anymore when it is. So if we've tried this Service Fabric native to Service Fabric Mesh, there are actually sort of three categories. There's the you bring your own, there's your XE version, then there's using reliable services and reliable actors, and we should talk about them all individually. Moving kind of XEs effectively should be completely straightforward and completely transparent. It's put it all inside a container, run your code, and host it inside the Service Fabric app model. The reliable services and reliable actors have slightly different choices at the moment. With the reliable services, the path we've been going down there is decoupling the reliable dictionary from as an independent deployable thing that you can run with any framework of your choice. And we're still on track to do that, and we still have that as a piece of work that we are working on. So effectively, the goal there would be you would now develop. If you looked at it before, you'd had to derive from stateless the base classes from reliable service, stateful and stateful service. Those per se, you got those because you basically wanted a reliable dictionary or reliable collection characteristics. So it's not exactly the same, but it would be, take your ASP.NET application and rather than driving it from, say, stateful service again, this time it would just be take your ASP.NET application and import NuGet packages that gave you the reliable collection data types and use it that way. So it is a code rework, but it is equivalently exactly the same. The third one, of course, is reliable actors, and the reliable actors is a bit trickier because it's very deeply ingrained with the Service Fabric runtime and Service Fabric clusters today all the way through because it's built not on top of the reliable collections, but there's other integration points, particularly with the rest of Service Fabric in terms of naming discovery and where these things run. And our current thoughts are certainly that we are going to have, the plan is this, we are certainly going to have an actor runtime that is independent of Service Fabric that you can host inside a container and run. Will it be exactly the same as Service Fabric reliable actors is the question. So basically it'll be a similar way that we've done with the path of reliable actors. We want to try and split out the reliable actors runtime, put it into a separate runtime that you can host inside a container and run that anywhere. But it may or may not build directly on top of reliable collections. It may be built on top of other data stores as well, or have a choice for all those things. And so we're still exploring this direction. We have a lot of requests from this because there are huge numbers of Service Fabric IoT scenarios that use actors. It's a very common pattern. In fact, we can talk a little bit more about how we're helping just IoT generally. And a lot of people like the actor programming model just as the digital twin, the virtual device programming approach. So we will do this. Just to be completely transparent, there's also a desire to take that virtual actor model that you have inside Service Fabric and host it as a serverless service inside functions. So that's another direction that we're exploring so that we can think about where that goes. So hopefully it wasn't a complete answer, but to summarize, yes, you can move you will be able to move your executables, but both reliable services and reliable actors in exactly the same as their programming model right now. You won't be able to take those exactly the same as they are forward, but the capabilities of using reliable actors as a runtime and reliable collections as an independent set of deployable NuGet packages in other frameworks are certainly on our path, so you can achieve identical characteristics when you build an application that runs on top of the Service Fabric mesh.
Okay.
Yes.
Nicely done.
Longish answer.
Yeah. We're working on it.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
So,
interested in lift and shift legacy, ASP.NET, etc. apps to on-prem SF. It's mentioned quite a few docs, but the capability in VS 2017 seems to only target Azure. So I'm not quite sure what you mean by the VS 2017 can only target Azure thing. Maybe you can provide us more information there. The tooling in VS has this notion of environments and connections, and that connection can be anywhere. There's some integration with like logging into your Azure account and things like that. But fundamentally, that connection that is there can be any connection to any cluster. So there's nothing that would stop you from changing that connection information to be a local SF cluster on-prem rather than an Azure one.
I can jump in here. I mean, I asked the question. Hi.
Hi.
So I was using the add container orchestrator support on a option on the VS 2017, and that creates a separate application in VS 2017 with Service Fabric container support. And unfortunately, the publish button, the dialog expects an Azure registry. So if so I think that's kind of like different than what it does when you manually go and configure a container application for Service Fabric, which allows you to build it, and then actually when you deploy to Service Fabric itself goes and pulls the stuff out of Docker and builds your image on the actual fabric itself.
So I believe that the tooling is selecting Azure Container Registry as the home for the image. It's not saying that Azure has to be where the cluster is, though. Is
correct? No, yeah, that's correct. That's exactly correct.
Okay.
So it kind of defaults everything to having an Azure registry available, which on-prem you don't. So that kind of breaks the process right there. So I just wanted to bring it up.
Sure. Where do you keep where would you like to target the Docker images then?
Either do it the same way you do it when you manually do it. Like if you manually create a brand new Service Fabric container application, it doesn't. The publish dialog does not ask you for a registry.
Sure.
When you deploy it, at that point in time, after the deployment, the Docker command execute on the Fabric, I think, and build they pull the image and they create everything on the Fabric itself.
But when you say pull the image, it's pulling it from somewhere. If you're talking about your local like F5 debugging experience, it's all local. So since the image is already on your laptop, right? It doesn't need to pull the image from anywhere, right? So that's how you get the local F5 debugging. Everything is nice setup because the tooling knows that the image is already on your laptop.
Right.
For a real cluster, any remote actual cluster, whether it's in Azure or a Service Fabric standalone cluster, the container image has to be in some hub or repository somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually. To be honest with you, I don't know where he got it from. So I have a development cluster of 5 nodes, not on my desktop. It's an actual, 5 nodes out there, and I pushed an image that it contained. It contained a Microsoft IIS Docker image from Docker Hub, and somehow our cluster by default found it and used it. So
yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
It went up to probably Docker Hub and pulled it down.
Yeah, by default, so it did that. But when you try to do it the other way, it expects you to give it a Azure registry. So I'm saying the two behaviors are different.
Which is a fair point. So that should be more configurable, and I think that's if there's already a feature for this or something. Do we have feedback captured for this somewhere that you know?
Yeah, we should really capture.
I do have an open issue on GitHub under Service Fabric issues.
I would link.
But this is a Visual Studio tool.
Yes, it is. We'll have to route it to them. Yeah. But if you, I would dump that in the chat window if you haven't already, and we'll forward it on to the VS tooling guys and see.
I'm adding it right now. It's
cool. Cool. Okay, so that makes sense.
Do you mind if I add to that since I've had to do that?
Sure, go ahead.
Jump in.
Hey, Matt. Actually, the VS tooling in 2017 for any of the container when you want to use the publish is limited to Azure Container Registry. In 2019, you can define anything you want as a registry endpoint.
I see. I wonder if that's
it's common tooling, but that was one of the big things. What I would do is I would just modify the Docker files so that it put the full path of the registry I wanted in the -T for when it tagged them. So all you had to do was a push and skip the Visual Studio tooling.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect. Thank you for helping.
No problem.
Yeah, I hadn't actually tried it in 19 yet, so.
All right, so we
I'm trying
tackle this
19
one
plus.
from Shane, I guess. All right. Okay. Hi guys, I'm trying to implement a communications client to allow my front-end stateless application to find my back-end stateful partition on the cluster. Both are using ASP.NET Core. There are also new recommendations from Microsoft for ASP.NET Core 2.1 on managing HTTP clients using HTTP Client Factory. I'm trying to follow the patterns recommended by the Service Fabric team, but it is fairly complex and I feel like I am reinventing the wheel here. Is there already an HTTP communications client implementation out there somewhere? I could use reverse proxy or the built-in Service Fabric remoting tech, but I'd prefer to implement the communication client pattern if possible.
So I've dumped into the chat window. You're gonna have to scroll down a little bit. A link to the ASP.NET integration that we already have that I think helps figure some of this out. You might start there. I don't know if that's the boilerplate stuff that you're looking for, or if you're trying to do something a little bit more custom. I'm trying to understand from your question if it's specifically the client side that is the problem for you, where you're trying to wrap around HTTP client yourself, or if it's kind of the whole stack that's giving you trouble. So I would say I would start at that ASP.NET integration. At a minimum, it probably has some code you can borrow, and we can go from there. If that doesn't look like what you're trying to do, maybe reply and we can try and get you a better answer, or see what's up with the ASP.NET and integration that doesn't work for you today. Excuse me. Sorry.
Okay. All right, from Marcy.
Any chance we see reliable collections in mesh timeframe in the large upcoming conference in May?
What conference is
really?
that?
Difficult to tell right now. Probably it's less likely. We're working through things still. I can't say yes or no either way, but I mean, at this point in time, it's on our roadmap. It's on our roadmap. We build these things and we try to get them into the next release. We're certainly trying to target a 6.5 release in the build timeframe, although it's actually looking like it's going to be after build for the 6.5 runtime release. We are planning on doing a refresh for mesh coming up before build, and inside that we are going to have 4 capabilities that we're trying to get into it, which is the managed identity support, the monitoring and diagnostics, support for Linux containers, and one other one I can't remember off the top of my head. But no,
VNet integration maybe.
No, not a VNet integration. We're still waiting. I wish that was the case. Yes, I wish that. We're still waiting on the networking guys to do all that sort of stuff. But you will see a mesh refresh that we're trying to target for the build timeframe. But collections, no, it's a tough one. I can't really say yes or no at the moment.
Great. Looking forward.
And when you say envision actors and functions, well, let's just be really clear here. We are working with the service architect team, working with the functions team to help them understand what that means. Do they have any specific state limit? No. I mean, our goal will be, like we've run before, is can you have a pluggable state storage for actors that you run there? So this is state storage, Azure Storage, or is it Redis, or is it whatever you want as a choice? So, but it's like all these things with actors. Should you put a gig in it? No. It should be more like, use it for the tens of K for the state, for the thing that you're trying to do. It's not a database. It's a piece of state for, more.
Because I have a case of something like objects between 1 megabytes and 10 megabytes in memory, and
yes.
Looking for and looking to use this as a stateful function, something like that. That it very likely will be hit by the same. All the requests directed to this actor will be hit to the same actor, and I will not have to pay for the serialization all the time. And and if there are multiple subsequent requests, like in the 10 minutes time frame, I would like to have them handled by the same, let's say, function instance. So this is the range I'm looking for. So it's like 1 to 10 megabytes in memory. So it will be similar in the serialized state. So
feedback. All right. Yeah, good feedback. So we know what the sort of state things that you're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Question for Sean here.
I think from James.
What's the logging story for certifying mesh with containers? Is the direction going to continue to be log analytics? You talk about logging and service fabric mesh. What are we doing?
Yeah. So with service fabric mesh diagnostics, we have a few things available for container logs. Obviously, you can build your own solution. You can bring a sidecar along with your mesh app and either pump the standard out logs to anywhere you want to go, or you can write your own custom telemetry with like the App Insights SDK, for example, and send data out that way. So that's all logs and telemetry from within your containers and applications themselves. We also provide metrics available for both Windows and Linux containers. So that's actually now live. And pretty soon with the mesh release, we'll have the instructions on how you can do that with Azure Monitor. And then for the last bit is the platform events for your containers, which is like when a container is started and stopped and whatnot, and that we have available right now through the CLI. If you just if you do the show command for your app or your event, your containers, and then it's also available in the portal too.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Cool.
All right, the next one is basically, how's open sourcing going? From A to Z.
So the question was, like, are there any known blockers? There's not really any blockers at this point. It's mainly that we're trying to kind of evolve how the team works to figure out how much work we can do in the open like that, and then keeping the code bases in sync while we make that transition. That's kind of the process side of things that we're still working on. As far as I know, the whole thing's open source at this point. I know there was a part where we hadn't open sourced the collections code for a while. As far as I know, that's on there now. I wish Vlad or Voss were here; he would know for sure. But
we did do the vast majority of it already. I just think that
there might be a few things hanging around on the edges, but as far as I know, though, it's all out there.
Yeah, I think more of the case of like it needs to have a refresh of some of the latest code.
Yeah,
it's
that synchronization, and like when we make a change, and sometimes we make a PR, like we pull a PR into the public stuff, and then we have to pull that into the internal source code, and then do a build, and then release everything, and then put it back out and merge it back into the public one. So we're still trying to figure all that out, but it's mainly that back and forth is where we're stuck, and where the troubles come in. Trying to make sure that the builds stay the same, stuff like that. But there's it's all process. It's not, there's nothing that's technically blocking us at this point. I think at this point you can even build it on Windows successfully.
Yes.
So, but yeah, we're hoping to do more there. I think we're also focused a lot on trying to get a better story out there for how we communicate things like our roadmap.
Yes.
And what changes are, and what bugs are going to get fixed in a given release, and what the release notes look like, and that is kind of where we're at in terms of the open sourcing. So the code's all out there, but we want to do more planning and communication in the open, and that's something that we're trying to figure out. Is it a blog? Is it a bunch of GitHub issues? How do we tag things? We have a bunch of different open source repos, so that the patch orchestration application is an open source thing. The HTTP stuff that I posted is an open source thing. How do we communicate dependencies and where fixes are? Figuring all that out is kind of where we're at right now. So I think that's kind of the next thing that we're focused on. That, and figuring out how to keep the code in sync.
Yes.
Let's see.
I don't have any new ones.
I'm still trying to answer the HTTP stuff correctly.
Okay.
So that's good.
So we have kind of a smaller crowd here today. So, I mean, if it's easier for you to just unmute yourself and ask your question, that should be okay as well.
Or there was talk of a demo at some point.
Oh, we got a demo?
Well,
I don't know whether or not we're still going to do it.
did you
Since we have the time.
The Humio monitoring, we couldn't get them.
Or at least talk about it.
I mean, I can talk about it. So with Service Fabric, sorry?
Talk about it.
Oh, okay. So with Service Fabric Diagnostics, we expose all the platform level events in a very standard format, which is ETW on Windows, and then also through syslog on Linux. So we do this because one, a lot of customers might want to write their own ETW providers and traces, and they want to be able to collect all the data easily like that. And then the second most obvious reason is that since it's a Windows standard, many other custom logging solutions can read ETW pretty easily. So we've integrated with a bunch of diagnostics or monitoring vendors such as Dynatrace, Datadog, AppDynamics, New Relic, and a bunch of all these names are in our docs and on our blogs as well. We recently announced a new integration with one called Humio, and they're really known for their speed and their ability to scale with data. So if you check out our blog right now, one of the latest posts is about our new integration with Humio, and in there's a link to the actual GitHub repo of the integration. So it's fully available for you to see. I encourage everyone to check that out. We had a really cool partnership with the folks there. They're actually based in Europe, and then we have some folks in Europe as well working really hard over the last few months to get this out.
Cool. So another good monitoring solution out there
Yeah.
for people to use.
Yeah, they're part of they're on the CNCF landscape as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so we got one in from Marcin. Any chance for reverse proxy V2 anytime soon?
What's V2 mean?
Well, it probably means all the Envoy integration.
Oh, right. Yes.
As far as I know, that's still stuck on the Windows port work. So I don't believe there's anything there for it yet. I mean, we are continuing to evolve that as we need to for mesh, but I don't know that it's going to get integrated into the core platform in a timely manner yet, because of we're trying to make sure that, first of all, that the Linux and Windows side of things are the same, so the port is complete, and then also making sure that we can roll people from the existing reverse proxy to the Envoy-based one easily, right? If it breaks all the communication, we can't do that. We break all sorts of things. So
Yeah.
figure out how do we ship them side by side and let you figure out how to, flip traffic over, or do we do some fancy redirect or something? So we have to figure that part out as well. So it's not just the port, though that is part of it. It is then figuring out this migration so we can get rid of the existing proxy if possible.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that there are huge problems with this port, like the limitations of Basel and stuff like that, and it looks like it will take some more time.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the only serializer option for remoting and reliable collections the data contract serializer?
No. Heck no.
No, you can plug in your own serializer if you want, or
Yeah.
other ones, but that's what we default to.
Yeah. So I've got, I don't know if you consider it easy or not, but you can definitely put in your own serializer. I'm going to pull up a sample that I have where I show how to register and use the custom serializers, but it's not too bad. And you can pick basically any serializer you want. I think that example one that I have has a kind of toggle, either it's default JSON or protobuf. But yeah, that's fully supported, and especially if you have your own complicated types, we know that data contract serializer can be a little slow, it can generate garbage. So if you're noticing that that's a performance bottleneck in your code or in your service, you can absolutely swap out the serializers. We do encourage people to test thoroughly, particularly if you have a running service and you're trying to switch serializers. That can get really, really complicated. So hopefully there's not too much data in the service yet. But custom serialization is definitely something we support to get away from data contract. There's actually also custom serializers built into SF for common types. So if you've got like int string and are worried about the behavior of data contract serializer under those conditions, don't be. We've already plugged in simple serializers for the basic primitive types, so that you don't hit some of the bad behavior of DCS. And as soon as I quit talking, I'll grab some links and stuff them in the notes there.
So the response was cool.
Cool. Let me find.
I have a bit of a demo.
Cool.
I think, but we have a couple of more questions. I think.
Are you?
Yeah, there's
Dude.
from Marcin. Are you considering providing Fluent Bit, and a service fabric mesh as a platform service?
Yeah, so we were thinking about that, like having something managed where we would spin that up on your behalf. Right now, we don't have plans to implement that yet. That might change in the future, but you can always bring your own solution. That'll always be available. Yeah, sorry, that's not the response you're looking for.
Yeah, because I'm basically because console logging is very limited, and I'm looking for some kind of cross-platform way to do structured logging, and Fluent Bit looks very promising to me because it's very small and very efficient. But I think that it would be the best as a platform-provided service. So you just log to the standard Fluent Bit, Fluent D port, and for using their forward protocol, it's a cloud native solution, so it's kind of a standard. And Service Fabric Mesh then deals like a part of configuration where these logs are delivered. So I was thinking about using this as a sidecar or stuff like that, but then it always leaves you with the configuration effort. But I think that logging is such a standard service that it might be useful to provide it as a part of platform.
Yeah, agreed.
If somebody want to get.
Yep. So question on transaction performance. Add or update async on a reliable dictionary, 5-node cluster, 70 transactions a second. There are some benchmarks I'll link to one example of the performance numbers. Basically, there's a existing sample that we hand out that you can run that and use that as kind of a benchmark. But one of the things about when you say your local dev 5-node cluster, you mean like just one machine, I think. Keep in mind that all those replicas are sharing the same drive. So you're writing five times as much stuff or 3 times as much stuff, depending on how the service is set up, to the local machine as you would be. That's usually some bottleneck for your local development. There's also, as we just mentioned, custom serialization. So if you profile it and you see that data contract serializer is getting in the way, that's certainly going to be something. In a real distributed environment, it's kind of a trade-off, right? You'll be spending a little more time on the wire, but you'll have less contention for things like system-level locks and drives. So usually the distributed performance will be better. It also, of course, is highly dependent on what the machine is. So SSDs do a lot better than spinning media. The network is not usually the performance bottleneck. It adds some latency, but it's not usually where the problems are. Usually it's contention for system resources on a given machine. And I can find I'll pull up the perf test sample. Basically what we say is create a cluster in Azure, deploy that sample, run the test, and see what the benchmark numbers you get out of it are. That sample is also not highly optimized, right? It's not attempting to be the best possible case. It's attempting to show what you can get kind of in the baseline. And then things like optimizing your transport, optimizing your serialization, thinking about the size of your data, stuff like that, lets you go kind of up from there. But it's designed to provide a baseline.
I've posted it. I think I posted the right one.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
that should be it.
Yeah, we use that just because your app coupled with the type of machines you have are the kind of defining criteria about what perf to expect.
Right.
That's the one that we run daily, effectively, to keep our numbers. This same test case.
Question on scheduling, which Mark already answered. Great, thank you. Question for you.
Yeah, got it.
It's good. Nailed it.
Awesome. I was all on it.
The Docker question. Anyone else still suffering from Docker Service Fabric DNS issue on their local machine? I've tried everything recommended, but I'm still having problems with it not working. I've moved on to other things until I hear that it's finally fixed. I've not done anything with Mesh for the last month, so I'm not aware of any improvements.
Clint, were those issues on? Okay, so did you have problems in Mesh as well, or just your local development? Maybe that's something that I haven't seen anything on my local machine in a while. I know that there is a situation where internet connection sharing can still conflict once in a while, but I thought we had most of these things solved. If there's a GitHub issue that describes what you're seeing locally, maybe just link us that one and I can go follow up on it. Or create one and throw it at us. As far as I know, most of the local things were solved. I also hadn't heard of anything in mesh specifically, but maybe there's something there.
No, I mean, again, it might be a mesh local development environment.
I
It's the
see,
same issue.
which I don't do. I personally,
So
yeah.
you put your local development into mesh
Right.
mode or into service fabric mode, and you still have the DNS service running in both cases. So tell us which one of those is, if it is your local machine in the mesh mode, and well, we'll look into it if you're going to get a issue.
Yeah.
I think I haven't experienced it myself, but I don't always run in mesh mode. I'm running more in native mode.
Right.
I think he said it's going to try again.
Yeah, try it again and either see if there's an existing GitHub issue that describes it, the symptoms that you're seeing.
We did have issues there.
I know we did.
Yeah.
I thought most of them were resolved, so I'm kind of surprised, but we'll get this figured out. Yeah, DNS is one of those, gifts that keeps on giving, but we'll figure it out.
All right, Marcin wants to give us a shout out. Application insights are working great again with ASP.NET Core, even in shared process hosting model.
Oh, awesome, thanks. I will let the team know that developed that NuGet package.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good one. Yep. Deep's just gonna stand in front of the camera for a while as if he spent the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, look at here. Andrew says, why is
Why is Deep late?
You're not being very
Most important
sneaky.
question of the day.
Moreno. Wow, thank you, man. I
Not being-
appreciate it.
Not being very sneaky there.
You can answer the question.
Yeah, I can
wanna do
answer.
it?
Well, actually,
Do
it's
demo.
special sauce that you'll find out about in May and June.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a good reason. I just can't tell you what it is.
Oh, great. All right, so
I only
since
joined
the
to say
questions
hi to
have slowed down a bit,
Hi,
we're
Andrew.
gonna do a demo, guys.
Let me do a short little demo of something that was fairly interesting that came out that you may have noticed. The Event Hub team posted this thing called Service Fabric Processor. And what it is it's a great way of, if you use Event Hub today, if you use Event Hub client library, there's a thing called Event Hub Processor, which allows you to keep the state of where you read from the last Event Hub partition so that you can read from each one of the partitions from Event Hub. So because Service Fabric knows how to do stateful stuff, we got them to write a thing called Service Fabric Processor that remembers how to read from each one of the partitions and has effectively is a partition Service Fabric service that can then pull from each one of the partitions and push the data out to where you want to go. So effectively, you can set up an Event Hub like I have done here. So I have a Service Fabric Event Hub inside here. I can register an IoT device with this. You see I have a little device down the bottom here. And then with the Event Hub, and then I have this class I can use. So this is this is a little program. This is a sample application that sends some code. But with the Event Hub processor, if I just switch over to this moment, effectively you create.
Minimize that.
Should I minimize this? Right. Yeah. Yeah. What you do with the Event Hub processor is that you can create this. You can create the Event Hub connection string. You can create an instance of your Service Fabric processor, which you initialize with the service name, with the partition ID, with characteristics, because it runs as a stateful service itself. And then you give it this class here called which is an instance of your iEvent processor. And the iEvent processor has open methods on it, has closed methods on it. And then effectively, the interesting part is that you get pushed onto your code this process event async messages. So effectively, when you deploy your Service Fabric processor, for each instance of it that's running that's tied to an Event Hub partition, you get called the event processor event async methods. And inside here, of course, you can then do whatever you need to do for the messages that get called for you. So effectively, it will continuously look at your Event Hub partition, and when messages appear inside there, they push them to you rather than you having to poll it, rather than you having to figure it all out.
And previously, we had a sample that you had to do all that. You'd pull out of Event Hub and you'd stuff your checkpoint in a collection and keep track of where you were and do all this yourself. And this just automates all of it.
And this just automates it all for you. It's awesome. It's an awesome, amazingly great example. It also has process errors inside here. So what you effectively see inside diagnostics is you see here it publishes that in that sample inside here where it says write this current message inside here. If I go off to my sample sender here, And if I was running this just now, if I do this and I just do start new instance of this, and I run a bunch of data inside here, so this pushes a bunch of messages as if it's coming from that device. And what will then happen is that your Event Hub processor here gets called for each one of those, and you can see it writes out diagnostics events inside here. So you can see it said, on partition 2, it got the last sequence of messages here from the temperature sensor here and what the humidity was. They weren't just coming in for the last few moments, but you see I've been pushing here out all the events from that. So it makes it super simple now for you to integrate to either Event Hub, and the back of IoT Hub is just another form of Event Hub to get pushed with all these messages. And then of course from here, when you inside your code inside here, what we see people effectively do inside your process event async is they effectively spin up an instance of an actor or reference an actor for the identity of the service, and then sort of just push the message to this. So here you're receiving the messages here, and you then typically push them off to other services. Either you build another stateful service you run it to, or you state an actor to. And when you actually look at this inside what's deployed inside your local cluster, you'll see that here's my Event Hub processor sample, and you'll see that it deploys a stateful service with 4 partitions in for the stateful service. Each one of these reading from my Event Hub, which is also has an event 4 partitions inside it. So each one is reading from that. So it's a super simple now way of tighter integration for IoT scenarios where you can receive messages on a per partition basis and then get them processed either with some reliable actors or other reliable services of your choice. Great piece of work. It's in preview at the moment, and we're working with them to get it to GA in the next few months.
Mark, there's a follow-up question. Like, can you have multiple processors listening to the same event hub? Is the question.
Multiple processors.
Multiple event processors, these things.
Yes, you can. Yes,
you can,
but it gets a bit weird though, because you don't know which one's pulling which. But yeah, I mean, if they register with on the partition.
I think the hiccup becomes the checkpointing, knowing where you are in the event stream.
Yes.
I don't honestly know how they've handled that.
Yeah.
In the old sample, we would have said not to.
Yes.
Because any given service would not be able to know if a given message in the event stream had been processed or not. And so it would like to pull, it knows where it is in the stream, it goes to pull something out and it's not there, or it pulls again. So you'd have duplicates. But if the thing that you're sending to downstream can handle duplicates, then I don't think that there's a problem. I haven't tried it. Most of the time, for simplicity, it's one processor per partition of the event hub, so that you can keep track of where you are in each independent event stream.
Another cool thing that they actually built into this, or which I was trying to see if they had metrics, is that when a particular partition is getting overloaded with messages, it does report load back onto how much it's consuming, and so it'll actually push back on how it receives messages. It says how much load I'm receiving, and will throttle the number of requests that get sent to it all. So that's quite a cool feature around it all.
Could you use a consumer group to do that?
Yeah,
what he's asking?
Yeah. You could have different consumer groups.
Yes.
I think that's in the connection options when you set the thing up.
Yeah, when you set the thing up, yes, you can do that.
So yeah, that's another way of getting multiple listeners or multiple processors per underlying event hub partition, is to use that consumer group concept.
Yeah.
That's another way to fragment that stream, or just have more partitions. That's another thing that people do a lot.
Yeah, so you can set it to push back on different metrics as well. It's kind of a cool feature though, so that they get spread even. In fact, I think it will spread it evenly across them actually, even as well. So that if one's getting overloaded, they'll actually balance it across others.
Well, I mean, it also depends on how you're writing your events into the event hub in the first place.
Correct. Yes.
Whether or not you're choosing the partition key or letting event hub distribute them for you. If you're choosing partition keys, then you have a little bit more control over how loaded any given partition is, but that can be unnecessary unless you're trying to, like, I don't know, try to ensure order or things like that.
Yeah.
It's not usually necessary.
But yeah, so it's a super cool piece of code, and the combination of this, the event hubs with other services running in the back end calling. So I'm going to try and work to refresh a sample we had. If you're going to look into Service example, there's one called IoT sample, and I'm going to try and replace it where we built a piece of code this ourselves. I think it was called the reader or something like that, and put this thing in place inside there, so you can actually see this new version running inside there.
Cool.
All right, let's jump back to questions.
And there's a question on that about, are we considering similar kits for other Azure messaging things like storage queues or service bus? So interestingly, this was the Event Hub team kind of came to us initially and said, hey, what about, we see you have this sample, what if we did, a real piece of integration? Maybe because we don't have samples that show talking to storage queues, the storage team hasn't come and said, hey, let's do some integration.
Yeah.
But it's something we could probably do. There's no other ones that I know of in the works right now. Hooking event hubs up to Service Fabric is one of the most common things that I've seen people do. So that's kind of the one that we tackled first. But you're right, there are opportunities for other integrations out there. It's probably something we should look at, but we don't have anything in the flight right now.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to quick fire round. If there's more questions, this is the opportunity to throw anything else at us.
Where are we?
Oh, we did a similar thing with Cosmos DB processes about a hard time having control over the load because we were bound to Cosmos DB partition. Oh, that's why I asked.
That's why you're looking for the multiple consumers, right? Yes. Yeah, the consumer groups in Event Hubs is probably the clearest equivalent, or the way that we'd recommend doing it. If you aren't doing the checkpointing and you have multiple readers out of a given Event Hub, you just have to deal with the fact that they're all going to be at kind of different spots in the stream, and that whatever's downstream is going to get duplicates. Also, because it's not like Service Bus where the event is removed from the hub once it's consumed, right? It's still up there, it's a log. And so when you have multiple consumers, you have to kind of know to skip over the events that the other guys processed, otherwise you'll process them again. And so you don't get much benefit normally out of having multiple readers unless you also have that consumer group thing, or I've seen event streams that have particular pointers to other events in the event stream. So you'd read event A and it says skip 27 events. And so you just pull the next 27 events out and throw over them, or set your checkpoint to 27 events in the future and jump to there and then read the events that way. That gives you this kind of benefits of having multiple consumers without just processing things over and over and over again. But I've seen people also who just process things over and over again for HA or error detection or a whole bunch of other reasons that you just don't mind processing things repeatedly. But yeah, probably consumer groups is the simplest answer.
We got an awesome question in the chat.
Yeah. What are you guys most excited for Service Fabric's nearest future?
We should just go around and be like, top thing.
No.
What are you most excited for, Mark?
You start.
Yeah, why don't you start, Dean?
You start.
Yeah, hold on. You're gonna put me on the spot.
You seem awfully excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited about Cross AZ.
Yeah, you excited about Cross AZs?
Yeah. Cross AZ clusters and
Okay, Cross AZ's clusters.
It's a long time due, I think.
Yeah.
My turn. I mean,
I know my one.
A lot of the stuff that I'm working on is a little bit further out, but there's a lot of little fiddly improvements inside things like the replicator and the collections that we're doing that should help improve performance, particularly during things like checkpoints and building up new replicas. We've been doing a lot of improvements there. So it's not going to be super visible stuff unless you're paying very close attention, but it is going to be a substantial improvement.
I know mine, which is way above everything, and that is managed identities on applications.
Yes, that was one of the ones.
It's the number of customers that we just talked to who have to have difficulty with managing certificates, and just the whole identity of getting cert into my code in order to be able to authenticate and talk about anything else, to talk to another service, or particularly another Azure service. Managed identities is just going to make your life so much easier now, because you'll have a local endpoint you talk to, you get the identity of the actual processes running, the services running, and then you can just talk to Azure Active Directory and Key Vault and download the certs, or the credentials you need from Azure Active Directory to make life much easier for communicating with other Azure services. The one caveat to all of that, though, is that you have to start deploying everything through ARM-based deployments. So the combination of managed identities with ARM-based deployments for applications and services is something that will change the way you have to deploy your application. So there is a little bit of a caveat in terms of our deployment mechanisms. But given that I learned that Azure Deployment Manager,
Yes, that's what it's called.
Azure Deployment Manager,
Yeah, and it's going to help you deploy in multiple regions
Yeah.
using the same ARM templates.
yes,
And then it's going to integrate with Azure DevOps. So we have a good solution coming from.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And.
Cool.
Nice.
I have a question.
Nice.
So is there, I think the first question is for those of you that,
they publish benchmarks and numbers
Yeah.
for the perf numbers.
yeah,
We never actually publish benchmarks per se on anything with specific hardware around these things. We're always somewhat hesitant.
Did
to do
Marcin
this.
have some benchmarks? that
but
he-
like you did share one.
No, we
Well,
shared
that's
the
a
frameworks
test.
for
That's a
doing
test,
things like
yeah.
that, but this is, on your D5, V4
Yeah,
series,
yeah.
with this particular application, with this particular message size, everything between them all, what was the perfect numbers that you actually saw?
True.
There are some historical numbers published in, again, by Jesse, who helped us out a lot. I've linked that there. Those are a little bit older now. I think he did those tests back in 6.2 or something. So, maybe take them with a grain of salt, but they're an okay baseline. Something you can look at, and it probably needs some updating, but I wouldn't expect it to be substantially different. But there are some improvements that have gone in since then. For those of us who aren't going to be at Build, sorry, Andrew, can we expect to see us Ignite? I have no idea when Ignite is or how far out that
It's
is.
now
We'll make
November.
sure that a good amount of us are there.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Ignite is in November.
It's in
It is
November.
Orlando.
That is like 8,000 years from now.
No, it's not. No, it's a well-established event. It's in November.
It's in November.
Hold on, it used to be in September until this year, so you can't say well-established event and now it's in
No,
November.
but
Same
the
sentence.
dates are
No,
published.
they
My-
scheduled the event like a year in advance.
My event horizon is in how far out I can think about events is about a week.
There you go.
So that's all I have to look forward to. So I mean,
Yeah.
I got,
We'll be there, we'll be there.
The,
I'm sure there will
the
be.
good thing about Ignite is it runs a whole week, and because they hold it in such a massive convention center, you can get many more sessions there to talk about your things quite easily, as opposed to Build, where it's a massive dogfight for 3 days, where the first day is taken up by keynotes anyway. So you're a lot more constrained around the capabilities, the number of opportunities.
There's a question about the performance of reliable concurrent queue. A single in queue operation takes more than 20 milliseconds. Is it normal? I can't say without knowing more about the hardware environment. 20 milliseconds seems like maybe a little bit of a long time, but it depends a lot on the number of replicas you have and how far apart they are and things like that, how big the data is. I mean, that seems long, but without knowing more about it, it's hard to say. It doesn't seem, I mean, it's long, but it's not that long. If you were telling me 100 milliseconds, I'd be really concerned. But like on local boxes, maybe that's just contention. That's not too bad. But yeah, we'd have to know more.
This depends on the mesh size quite a lot.
Yeah, it depends.
Okay, and with that, we're at the top of the hour. So
All right.
thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah, when's the next? Is it after Build next time?
Ooh, third Thursday.
Where's the third Thursday? Are we
When's
gonna have a
Yeah, so it'll
conflict?
be after Build.
When's it?
It'll be after Build.
It'll be Build's the 6th to the 7th, so it'll be 1, 2. So it's the week after Build, the 16th. So it'll be just after Build, and so hopefully we'll be able to show more demos and show.
Oh, how about
more,
that?
Talk about some of the updates.
All right.
Updates. That'll be quite an exciting one.
That will.
Okay.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you in the next one, or see those of you who are going to be Build at Build.
Yes.
Yes, completely come and find us at Build. We will be there on some form of boothie thing.
Okay.
You have our emails, so just
Yeah, find us.
yeah, we'll
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Bye-bye.
Bye.